Hi, my name is Wendy Amsellem. I teach here at Drisha. This week's Parsha is Parashat Nitzavim. And one of the interesting moments in Parashat Nitzavim, there's a description of how upon hearing all of the different covenantal oaths that the people have taken, we're told that one particular person, V'haya b'shom'o et divrei ha'ala hazot, when he hears about all of these oaths, V'yiparech b'levavo lemor, he will sort of, in his heart, bless and think, Shalom yeli, all will be good for me, Ki v'shvut li bi'elech, I will do whatever I like, L'man sefot haravat hatzmeah. And this phrase is actually a little bit difficult to understand. Many commentaries have different possible ways of reading it, but one that I liked a lot was the commentary of Ibn Ezra, who reads it as, he reads Ravah as being sort of well-watered, and that's referring to the righteous people, and Smeah is referring to this person who's kind of who's planning to go off and do whatever he wants, who's planning to be a sinner, who isn't kind of well-watered in good deeds. And Ibn Ezra's reading of the whole verse is that the person assumes that he will be able to kind of, go off and do whatever he wants, and that the general kind of good deeds of all the other righteous people of the community will kind of wash over him and kind of take him along with them, and so that his personal actions won't be recognized. The Parsha goes on to say, though, that this person's plan will not work out, and instead, Lo yuveh Hashem sloach, Lo, God in fact will not forgive this person for going off on his own and sinning on his own. And the Parsha goes on to describe this kind of amazingly terrible punishment that will ensue. The destruction will be so great that it's compared to the destruction of Sodom and Amorah. And it's not clear why this is so terrible, right? Why, if kind of everyone else is doing something good and this one person kind of decides on his own to opt out, what is such a bad thing about that? And I think sort of two things are a little bit instructive about that. One is that at the very end of the passage, there's a pasuk where Anistarot Lashem Elokeinu, things that are concealed are for God, v'haniglot lanu u'ledvanenu ad olam, but the things that are revealed are for us to deal with. And Rashi's understanding of this verse is that if people kind of do things in a hidden way and other people don't know about that, God will tend to that, and that's God's responsibility. But things that we see in our society, things that are clearly revealed, if we see them and we don't do something, if the things that are clearly revealed are bad and we see them happening and we don't do something to correct them, then we are all responsible for those deeds. And according to Rashi, that's why there is so much destruction that ensues when this person opts out, because apparently the person is acting in such a way that other people can see and can notice, and nobody does anything to sort of thwart the misdeeds of this person. So that could be one explanation for why there's this terrible destruction. Even though it's kind of one person doing something bad on his or her own, still if other people see the badness happening and kind of don't act to prevent it or don't act to stop it, then the whole community becomes responsible. I think another kind of possible insight that we can have into why there's this terrible destruction that's compared to the destruction of the cities of Sodom and Amorah has to do with a Mishnah from Tractate Avot. In the 5th chapter of Tractate Avot, there's a Mishnah that describes kind of 4 different types of people. The very best person is the person who says, what's mine is yours and what's yours is yours, right? They're so generous that they are willing to kind of give their things to someone else and also let the person keep their own things. The person in the Mishnah who's described as being kind of the worst is the person who says, what's yours is mine and what's mine is mine, right? They're very selfish, they kind of want everything for themselves. And then there's a person who's described at first as a middling person, right? As a midah binonit, as kind of the attribute sort of in the middle. And that's the person who says, Sheli sheli v'shelcha shelcha. What's mine is mine, what's yours is yours, and that seems sort of midway, right? Not quite as generous as me giving all of my things to you, but not quite as selfish as me taking everything for me. It seems to be, the person who says, I keep what's mine, you keep what's yours, and that's fine. And so the Mishnah first describes that as a midah binonit, as kind of a middle of the way attribute, but then we're told, v'yesh omrim, zo midat Sodom. But other people say that actually this is the midah of the sinful city of Sodom that gets destroyed in Genesis. I think that that's very interesting, right? There's a sense there that on the one hand you could say that in a society where people kind of just keep to themselves and don't kind of concern themselves with what other people are doing, that's kind of, a middle-of-the-way society, not quite as great as if everybody looked out for each other, but not terrible. But the second opinion of the Mishnah is that a society where everybody kind of just pays attention to what they're doing and doesn't kind of take any interest in wrongs that are happening outside of themselves is actually a society that is so headed for destruction that it is as terrible as the society of Sodom. And I think that might be kind of one of the explanations for what's going on in our parsha, right? We have this person who's sort of opting out on his or her own, right? Sort of deciding they don't want to be doing kind of the general good deeds of the population. And on the one hand, you could say, well, as long as most people are doing something good, it shouldn't really matter. And it certainly seems to be that that's what the person's own thinking about the situation is. But the parsha is telling us that actually it doesn't really work that way, that if you have a society where people are just kind of they're only sort of thinking about themselves, and they're not kind of thinking about what's going on around them, and they don't think that they have any responsibility for evils and wrongs that are going on around them, that is a society that really can't sustain itself, in a society that's sort of heading for this terrible destruction. And I think the reason why the verses go out of their way to kind of describe the destruction in such graphic terms is because I think people don't necessarily think of themselves as being responsible in that manner. People might sort of think, well, as long as I'm kind of doing my own good thing, that should be good enough. And I think the parsha is really challenging us to sort of think of ourselves as a larger unit, think of ourselves as being fully a part of a community where we are sort of responsible for things that are going on, even if they're not things that we are individually perpetrating. And hopefully with that in mind, we can challenge ourselves to create better and stronger and more responsive communities. Shabbat Shalom.